back in Nigeria, where the Naira hit its best positive position against the dollar on Tuesday, trading below the 1,500 level, just as the Statistics Office releases August inflation data that shows a softening to 20.12% for the month of August. In the meantime, the country's latest report shows a trade surplus, $8.4 billion in the first half of this year, in spite of persistent structural challenges within the home economy. The question, is the economy on the bend, paving the way for a rate cut at next week's central bank's policy meeting? Welcome my guest to discuss Nigeria's latest macros and the markets. Johnson Chukwu is a market professional and the group CEO at Carry Asset Management. A very good evening to you. Great to have you again tonight on the Arise Exchange.
Thank you, Bosin, for having me. Good evening.
Thank you so much. What's your reading of the August inflation at softer 20.12% and the 5-month consecutive decline in the headline inflation figure?
Yeah, Bosin, if you look at the factors that drive inflation in the country, you will actually recognize that they have actually been slowing. Some of those major factors are exchange rate pass-through effect of exchange rate depreciation. We've seen Naira appreciate in the past couple of months. The other factor is the price of refined petroleum products. We also know that has reasonably stabilized or to some extent reduced in the past couple of months. The other major elephant that drives inflation figure in the country is food prices. We know when the harvest season, at the time when there is a lot more surplus production of food crops. And despite the fact that we are still dealing with insecurity in major food beds of the country, but ordinarily by this time of the year, you see an improvement in food production. And then the government has also opened up to allow for importation of some food items. So these factors are clearly pointers to the decline in inflation, which has happened for 5 consecutive months.
We're getting a hand of that. If you tie the inflation data to that of trade figure for second quarter and the first half, effectively the first 6 months, that's the figure, $8.4 billion despite persistent structural challenges within the economy. Would you say that the economy is on the bend?
Yeah, Bosin, clearly there are some green shoots as it relates to the economy. We just talked about declining inflation trend. We started this year at 24.48% in January inflation figure. We're now down to 20.12% in August. In terms of exchange rate, we've seen a consistent appreciation in the exchange rate since the peak we suffered in April when Trump announced those tariffs. So we've seen consistent decline in exchange rate. Then in terms of trade, if you look at the first quarter trade surplus, you realize that first quarter we had a trade surplus of about 5 trillion naira. In the second quarter, that trade surplus grew to about 7.4 trillion naira, which is why you are talking of about $8 billion in trade surplus. And what has happened is that in terms of imports have remained about the same level, 15 trillion in the first quarter, 15 trillion, 15.2 trillion in the second quarter of this year. But in terms of export, we've seen a material improvement in export. In the first quarter of this year, we had an export volume of export trade about 20 trillion naira, and the second quarter of this year, an export trade of about 22.7 trillion naira. So in effect, we have had about 42.7 trillion naira, call it 45 trillion naira. In terms of export, we've seen an improvement in our export volume, export value, while as we have not seen any material change in our import. And that's why we're seeing improvement in our balance of trade. And that also flushes into our exchange rate, our foreign reserve, and which flushes into the exchange rate improvement we are just witnessing. And also that flushes into inflation, which I said, factors that drive inflation are pass-through effects of Naira depreciation, increase in petroleum motor spirit prices of fuel prices, and major material increase in cost of food items. So if you do not have any material increase in food items, and you are seeing a surplus in your trade balance, which is enhancing your reserve to about almost $42 billion, and led to an appreciation in your exchange rate, then you can tie these things together and say, look, the improvement in inflation is partly driven by improvement in our foreign trade balance.
Okay, so I'm ticking the boxes as you're speaking. Johnson Chukwu, I'm taking the box on inflation. I'm taking the box on exchange rate. We're now, at least for the first time, below the 1,500 level. Let's see whether this new level law will hold. Then, of course, ticking the box also on trade surplus. So, do you think that the macroeconomy has created that path to interest rate cuts now for the Monetary Policy Committee, Olayemi Cardoso and the rest of his team, next week, Tuesday, September 22nd?
Yeah, Boston, I had actually said in different fora that this is time for the Federal Central Bank, the Monetary Policy Committee, to signpost a change in direction and now focus on economic growth. Some of the pressures that they have, reasons they have used to tighten the monetary policies are: one, pressures on exchange rate; two, an increasing inflation rate. And both factors have all moved in the positive direction. And again, remember that in terms of GDP growth, the GDP growth even at about 3.3% is still sluggish. So the focus should not be how do we drive growth? How do we stimulate employment? How do we stimulate higher level of productive activities? And that will come from effectively driving down interest rate, even if it's symbolic. And my approach that the Monetary Policy Committee is time to do a symbolic adjustment to the interest rate by even reducing the monetary policy rate from 27.5% to about 27%. Just a reduction of about 50 basis points will send a message to the market that the government is now focused on driving economic growth, not just economic growth, higher level of productivity, making cost of funds cheaper for the real sector of the economy to grow at a faster rate.
Oh, interesting. So tomorrow we're going to have, by this time we're having the U.S. FOMC, the Federal Open Markets Committee, deciding on interest rate. It's not a matter of when, but by what size. Of course, everyone's agreed that the U.S. Fed tomorrow will cut interest rate at least 25 basis points. President Trump says he wants a bigger size interest rate cut, whatever happens. Do you think the Central Bank of Nigeria, the MPC, will be watching very closely how the Fed decides tomorrow and how the Bank of England also decides later this week, as well as the Bank of Japan, and on Thursday, the South Africa's Reserve Bank?
Yes, I mean, they would basically want to see what fellow central banks are doing, but basically the factor that drive the decision of the Monetary Policy Committee is largely endogenous, largely local policy environmental factors, issues around pressures on the interest rate, exchange rate, issues around direction of consumer price index, are major factor, and issues around level of economic growth rate, level of employment. So in as much as they want to observe what the Federal Reserve Bank will do, which everybody has agreed is going to be a cut, they've also seen what the Ghanaian Central Bank, Bank of Ghana did by reducing interest rate by as wide as 300 basis points in a one-fell swoop.
Yes.
And despite that, we've seen inflation drop about 11% in Ghana. So I think the Central Bank of Nigeria has enough body of information to also take it the same direction and say, look, we've driven down inflation to about 20.12%. We are now talking of exchange rate sub 1,500 naira to $1. We are talking of the pressures that we used to, that compelled us to tighten, have all eased to a reasonable extent. And it's time for us to now focus on growth. And because the reality is that if you grow productive activities, you are likely going to bring in a lot more goods and services to the economy that will bring down inflation rate on a more permanent basis.
All right, so let's take this to the market. What do you think the markets make of the latest macros, inflation, trade surplus, rate decision expectation, and how to navigate the final quarter of the year? The stock market index down 37.5%. I'm sure you are in the money already. Inflation at 20.12%. Even if you discount inflation, those of you in the market who are making at least roughly addition about 17 to 15% above inflation as we speak. So you folks are in the money by September. Is it time to sell and go away?
No, Boston, I don't think it's time to sell and go away. The market still bodes strong opportunities. Yes, the market did not respond so strongly to the information on inflation rate. Of course, the inflation figures came out yesterday, and as well, the trade figures came out, I think, 2 days ago. The market did not respond so strongly to it. We saw a market that was flattish today, a decline about 0.08%. But we have to recognize the fact that the market has actually gained 37.5%, like you rightly pointed out. So the market has, anybody who has been in the market, and you took a blanket, a basket of all the stock in the market, you would have gained over 37% this year. So the market is conscious of that level of gain, and the market would have priced in some of the information that came to the market in the open, like inflation rate. Everybody expected inflation rate will moderate, for that, though we may not have expected it will moderate to the level of 20.12%. So the moderation did not come as a surprise to the market. I think the market still present good opportunities. A couple of the companies that are quoted are still doing quite well, but I always advise investors to be discerning. Do not just invest in every stock. They are laggards in the market, and they are bellwethers in the market, and they are strong prospects in the market. So you need to be very choosy in making your investment decisions. But the market, as a broad market, as an equity market, still both strong opportunity. I don't think it's time for people to begin to lock in their profit.
Yeah, that's why I said to talk to professionals such as yourself at Carry Asset Management. What's your outlook on the macros and the markets for the fourth quarter? Give that to me in 1 minute.
Well, I think the macros are stabilizing. We're seeing declining inflation rate. We're seeing stabilizing exchange rates. We hope to see improvement in level of productivity, level of GDP growth rate. So we think the green shoots are increasing. In terms of the micro, I think corporate organizations will now be expecting lower interest rates so that they will improve on their level of, reduce their cost of production and possibly improve on their level of economic activities or level of productive activities.
Well, it's good time to be in good morning. Thank you so much for your insights, as always, on the macros and the market. Thank you so much. Have a great evening out there. Johnson Chukwu, the Group CEO at Carry Asset Management. Thank you. We appreciate it.